Hello, friends and nonprofit leaders. This is Laura Zelke. I'm the host of the Your Nonprofit Life podcast, and I'm so glad you're here. By the way, shout out to Loretta for the 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you. I have a special treat for you today, all the way from down under. I met today's guest a couple years ago in our very first ever fundraising boot camp in the lab. Chay Neal is the executive director of Animal Liberation Queensland in Queensland, Australia. Animal liberation exists to protect all animals from abuse, exploitation, and suffering, to foster respectful and compassionate community attitudes towards animals, and to promote veganism as the most ethical and ecologically sustainable lifestyle. During our interview, we discussed Chay's decision to go vegan. He started at a younger age than you might expect, and how love for his first pet ignited something in him that turned into a lifelong passion of advocacy for all living creatures. And I even learned a new word, speciesism. So we'll talk about that during the interview. We'll explore Chay's journey into the nonprofit sector, where he shares how he started out as a volunteer at different organizations and then eventually landed at the organization he now runs. We'll also talk about what it was like for him transitioning from a longtime board member position to being the organization's first paid staff. Chay will explain the organization's strategic use of storytelling to help open the minds and soften the hearts of lawmakers, inspiring significant change in the animal rights movement in Queensland and all over the world. I can't wait for you to meet Chay Neal and hear his amazing accent. Sorry, Chay, I couldn't help myself. I can't wait for you to meet Chay Neal and learn more about what you can do to make the world a more respectful and compassionate place for all living things. Hey, have you ever wished you could hear some good news for a change? Well, I might have just what you've been hoping for. Welcome to Your Nonprofit Life, where we remove our rose-colored glasses and explore what leaders are actually doing to move their nonprofits from messy to thriving without burning out in the process. I'm Laura Zelke, Director of Member Experience for the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. Join me each week to explore the ups, downs, and whoopsie daisies of your nonprofit life. Let's get started. Welcome, Chay. It is so great to see you again. And I'm so excited that you said yes to record this podcast with me. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
I'm excited. Did you hear his accent? Can you say my name again?
Laura?
I have Chay here with Animal Liberation Queensland, but I'm going to have him say it for you because it's located in Queensland, Australia. And I say it like a Californian who has Michigan parents, and I've been living in North Carolina for 20 years. So I say Animal Liberation Queensland. How do you say it?
Animal Liberation Queensland.
Queensland. And it's so great to see you. We actually did, I think you were in our very first fundraising boot camp that we did. Gosh, it's almost been 2 years ago in the lab. I can't believe it. And I remember just kind of being really, really intrigued by your mission. And we're going to get into all that in a minute. But before we get started, I just wanted to compliment you on your lovely tan. You know, here in North Carolina, it's the winter and everybody's bundled up and we had big snowstorms this week. What's the weather like over there down under?
It's pretty good here. Nice weather here on the East Coast. Of course, we've got bushfires again on the other side of the country, which is pretty devastating. Of course, we had bushfires the previous year on the East Coast. So yeah, but we're pretty fortunate here where I am.
Yeah. And did you tell me it's summer there right now?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. So we're in the middle of winter here, but I'm just really jealous of your tan. So now that we have that out of the way, I mentioned at the beginning just a little bit about your organization, but I'd love it if you could just kind of give us an overview of, we're just going to call it Animal Liberation. So if you would just give us an overview of what Animal Liberation is.
Yeah, so we're an animal rights organisation. And I mean, fundamentally, we're here because we don't think that people have the right to use, abuse or kill animals for pleasure, profit or any other reason. So the kind of things we do in practice, we lobby for changes to laws and regulations, we educate the public and help people to make more positive choices around the way they treat animals and hopefully not to eat them. And we also investigate and expose animal cruelty.
Okay. And so just not even eating them. So you're a vegan. And
That's right.
I'm really interested to know, like, how long have you been passionate just about saving the lives and advocating for animals? Like, when did that all start for you?
Probably started at quite a young age. We got a Labrador cross puppy when I was about 8 years old. And then it wasn't too long after that until I guess I had influence of a vegetarian. And yeah, pretty quickly I put it together that, a pig and a dog, they can suffer equally. There's no way I would obviously eat my Labrador, so why would I eat a pig or any other animal? So yeah, I think I went vegetarian around age 10. And then I thought I was doing all the right things until it was around when I was 18. I started doing a lot more research online and realizing the horrors of factory farming and also the dairy and egg industries and how, they're involved in that sort of thing too. And yeah, realized I had to be vegan and then started realizing I wanted to do more as well. So I wanted to become an activist and, advocate for the animals and try to affect change in some way.
Yeah, I think that is like you already had it at such a young age that you would stop eating meat just at age 10. And were your parents real supportive of that? Did they think it was just like a phase that you were going through, or were they supportive of you becoming vegetarian at that age?
Yes, my parents are very supportive. So my stepmom was vegetarian. So it was that time of life when she came into my life that I guess helped spark that idea too, and also made it easier. It meant that, there was already a vegetarian meal being cooked in the house. So there wasn't, I guess, as difficult that as other people may find it, eating the food provided by your parents. It can
Right.
limit your choices for some people.
Yeah. And you never felt like pressure from, going in high school. I mean, like it feels newer to me. I don't remember people being vegan when I was growing up. And I know I've got a couple decades on you. Do you know when veganism became a thing?
Yeah, it's definitely exploded over the last few years, maybe, 5, 10 years. But I think, yeah, 20 years ago, 19 years ago when I went vegan, it definitely wasn't as well-known term as it is now. You wouldn't see vegan written on, supermarket products
Right.
very readily, or vegan menus at restaurants, or even vegan restaurants. So yeah, I think it's definitely exploded in recent years. So
Yeah, it's really interesting just understanding that you're not just really an advocate, as in going out and like some people advocate and then they go home and they can eat whatever they want. But for you, when you're advocating for the lives of all animals, you go home and yeah, you can eat whatever you want, but you're making this choice not to eat animals. And I think that it's like a lifestyle. It's not just that you're an advocate at this organization, it's a lifestyle.
that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a major life change and something that, everyone involved in animal rights is, 100% committed to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, when you say that you were doing more research at age 18 to 19, what kind of stuff were you learning and how did that kind of grow in you at that young age?
Yeah, I guess it was a age when, life's about to change. I was finishing high school and the internet was still fairly, newish back then. There wasn't social media, there wasn't, internet on everyone's phone, but there were reliable, good websites and information accessible at your fingertips. So I spent probably far too many late nights researching websites and learning all about the horrors of factory farming and other things. Websites like PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, and other websites, and just educated myself. And the more I found out, the more I had to know. And then from there, I'm like, I think everyone needs to know this. And yeah, tried to get as vocal as I could over the years.
And so, did you then pursue something in college? I mean, did you go to college or did you go straight into activism?
Yeah, so I moved out of home and went to university. I was a bit disappointed that there wasn't any real college club on campus or anything like that that was, doing this type of activism. But, quickly met other people, or I did things by myself when I had to, and did all sorts of different activism. Yeah, of course, Animal Liberation Queensland actually did exist back then, but for some reason we didn't cross paths in those early years as much.
And so, did you go straight into animal advocacy or did you do something else in between?
Yeah, so animal rights has always been probably my biggest passion, but I've always been passionate about environmental issues and human rights as well. So I did university and then ended up working in IT for a few years. And then, yeah, eventually I did get a job in not-for-profit space working for an environmental charity, one of the larger ones here in Australia. And yeah, that was fantastic. Just, feeling like you're actually working towards change every day in the environmental area. So I worked there for 5 years, and that was really valuable too, to learn a lot of the skills in community organising and lobbying and advocacy. And then a few years after that I got the opportunity to work for Animal Liberation Queensland.
And when you started working with Animal Liberation Queensland, did you just start out on staff, or how did you get your start with your organization that you're at right now? Because you're the executive director right now, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I first got involved probably about 10 years ago, maybe even more than 10 years, when I started going along to a few protests and things like that. That was probably my first interaction with the organisation. And then got more involved in volunteering and got invited to join the board. And back then, the board was really the core of the organisation. They were the core volunteers that did the majority of the campaigns, advocacy, organising, all the kind of work that they do and are known for. So I ended up becoming president of the board for quite a number of years and becoming very involved and kind of spending all my spare time doing, activities with the organisation, for the organisation. But yeah, I think we all realised on the board that we'd reached a point where we were ready to make that step and take on full-time staff. So that was the next step, was to eventually employ me as the full-time executive director.
Wow. So I definitely want to talk about that, what it's like really being in an organization when you start as a volunteer, get on the board, go to board chair, and then become the first paid staff. And this is not a young organization. Is that correct? Like when you started volunteering with them, they'd already been around for quite a while. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So the organisation was founded in 1979. So I think I got involved around the 29th year, or 30 years, and we've just celebrated our 40th year. Yeah, it's quite an old organisation.
Right. And you're actually the first paid staff that they've had.
Yeah, there might have been a few sort of part-time office admin type roles in the early years, on and off. But yeah, certainly the first executive director, the first, I guess, full-time staff member.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to come back and talk about that. But before we get into what that must have been like, because I've been around long enough to know that there's always a story when you move from board to staff. So I'm really interested in hearing about what that transition was like. But before we get into that, I really would like you to tell the listeners what it is, like get a little bit more into the actual work that you're doing. Like I remember when we were working on your elevator pitch, you were telling me about live baiting and baiting, like BAITING, live baiting these greyhounds. And then you also, I think at the time, and again, this was a couple years ago, but you guys were working on something with calf roping. And so I just think it would be really informative and educational to tell the listeners what it is you guys are doing, because like you're not at a shelter, you're not a rescue organization, you're doing lobbying, you're trying to get laws passed, and you do investigations. And so please kind of tell us a little bit more about what you do there.
Yeah, so one of the tactics I guess we're best known for is really investigating, exposing that animal cruelty. Because as such a small organisation, I guess we're limited in how readily we can affect laws and, lobby decision makers. So we do what we can to look at other strategies and tactics to really push that change along. And one of those things can be, exposing some of this horrific cruelty that maybe some people knew about, maybe they didn't, but no one really had it in front of them, to kind of use that shock value to push it in the public spotlight and force change. So yeah, like you mentioned, that one of the ones we're best known for was the live baiting expose. So that started a few years ago, it was about 5 or 6 years ago now, when we were investigating the greyhound racing industry. Initially, the campaign was just about trying to stop a new local greyhound track being built. Thought that was something potentially achievable for a small organisation focused on stopping a local track. And we just weren't getting anywhere with council or state government, just being ignored. The entire community was behind us, but just being ignored at various levels of government. So we started to dig a bit deeper into the industry. We'd heard rumours about these extremely cruel practices that you mentioned, the live baiting, where the trainer would tie a live animal, such as a possum, rabbit, or even a kitten in some cases, to a lure to entice a greyhound to race around the track. And as you can imagine, it's horrific for the small animal involved. So we investigated that over a period of many months. We ended up, basically investigators would go out late at night around the edges of these private training tracks and plant cameras and microphones and attempt to document this animal cruelty. And yeah, it did take, a couple of months to find stuff, but I'll never forget, the first time you get the audio back. We didn't have the camera angles right the first time, but that audio of, hearing an animal squeal that, it wasn't a greyhound, there was other animals there and there was, something dodgy going on. And then so we just had to keep going back until we found what we're after. And then the other thing that we noticed was the more that we went back, the more we realized it was not just one or two rogue operators. It was many of the, so-called top industry trainers involved in the industry at the time were all going to this one training track and getting their dogs trained using this method. So yeah, eventually we had plenty of very compelling and shocking footage, and we worked with another larger organisation, Animals Australia, and they ended up doing investigations in 2 other states in Australia so that we could make this a really national story. And then from there, it was a matter of, I guess, really juggling our 2 priorities, which were, making sure people were prosecuted, because this was, highly illegal and definitely animal cruelty. But we also didn't just want it to be a, 1 or 2 off people going to court and then that's the end of the story. We wanted to make sure it was a massive public exposure. So yeah, we put complaints into the authorities, but also went to the media and developed quite a massive media story at the time.
It just sounds like so much work to do, and that's just one little aspect of it. And I wanted to point out too, for those maybe who aren't real familiar with Australia, so Queensland is a state over there.
That's correct.
And then you have different states. And so you were able to collaborate and really, really take advantage of making it a much larger story than it would have been. And I think that's a really good lesson for smaller nonprofits. I think sometimes, you can get into the mindset of that you have to do it all and that it's all on you and that you can't collaborate with another organization that has a similar mission because aren't you really competitors? Like people can get in that kind of mindset. And I think it really is like a limited mindset versus an abundance mindset. And for you guys to say, look, we're trying to move the needle against animal cruelty. And if we can get this to a wider audience, then we're absolutely going to collaborate. How was that as far as like donors? Did you feel like collaborating with a larger organization affected you at all, affected your organization?
No, we've always had a really good relationship with a number of organisations, but yeah, particularly with Animals Australia that we collaborated with on this one. And yeah, I guess just having that good relationship and viewing it as a collaboration and really not a competitive space at all. We're also fortunate that they were very generous, and I think we, in terms of that public exposure, we, I guess, got more exposure than we would have otherwise and, benefited from that collaboration quite a lot. So.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And how does an organization like Animal Liberation figure out what your next project's going to be? Like if you considered that like a project, how do you make your choices of what you're going to work on next?
Yeah, it is difficult and it can be quite overwhelming at times because, there's unfortunately, a huge number of animals being used in a huge number of different industries and, and bad things happening in all of them. So it can be very difficult to kind of pick our targets sometimes. But overwhelmingly, we do have, I guess, a strong focus on intensive farming and veganism because that's where, the largest number of animals are used in food. But we don't want to only focus on that because we realize there can be opportunities like with the light baiting to really push the needle a lot further with targeting a particular industry. So, sometimes things will come to us when information comes to us and we see an opportunity. Other times, as a small organisation that's still mostly volunteer run, we've only got 2 paid staff now. Sometimes a volunteer will come to us with an opportunity or just something they'd like to work on. And even if it's not going to be a massive campaign, it's just something they're quite interested in, raising a bit of awareness on, doing a bit of research on, even if it's just something really low key, like doing some blog posts, a bit of social media awareness around it, then we're really keen to support that and utilize that volunteer skills and, help collaborate there.
What do you think has been one of the bigger changes that you've seen? You said you've been there for probably 10 to 12 years now. What is the biggest change that you've seen regarding animals and how they're treated? Do you feel like things are getting better for animals, or do you feel like we're going backwards? I'm really curious.
It's difficult because, the numbers tell us that we're going backwards in some ways. The number of actual animals killed and used in different ways keeps increasing, which is definitely a concern. But at the same time, public concern for animals is definitely on the rise. And, there's been recent government-supported surveys here that have shown that, more than 90% of people are concerned about animal welfare. And most of those recognise that, there needs to be fundamental changes to our laws and the way we treat animals. So that's really heartening that I think, there is more and more community concern, but yeah, there's still a long way to go.
While you were just talking, I was imagining the kinds of animals that are in Australia. And, when you don't live in the country and you only hear about Australia, from media or whatever, I think, okay, so there's kangaroos, right? But then I remember that I see all this stuff on Facebook about the bats that are like as big as a dog. I mean, you're advocating for all animals. I just want to be clear. So even when we get those, like the memes of all the different massive spiders and all that stuff, I'm sorry, all that stuff. I'm like, and the animals, just they look really scary. And yet you are advocating to just be kind.
That's right, yeah. And we do delve into wildlife issues a little bit too. So like you mentioned the kangaroo, and sadly they're another victim here in Australia. We actually kill millions of kangaroos every year, which
really,
a lot of people overseas would be surprised at, like, because it's such an emblem, it's, icon of Australia.
And millions of them are killed. And why is that? Is it for food, or why do they kill kangaroos?
Yeah, for food, they use the leather as well. But I think a lot of it as well is really they compete with grazing areas for cows, for livestock. So there's invested interest in keeping their numbers down so that, the cows can have that pasture.
Wow. And so it's not done in any kind of natural way. Like I'm thinking of here in the United States, we have a place called Yellowstone National Park, and they've introduced wolves back into the park again because they had been eradicated and it's part of the ecosystem. And so rather than doing it that way, you're saying they're just kind of going out and just killing the animals. That's how they're maintaining the numbers.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, yeah, we've changed the natural landscape so dramatically with,
right.
Fencing, with bulldozing trees so that we've got room to graze cows. And then, of course, there's more pasture because we want that for the cows. And then, of course, there's more pastures and then there's more kangaroos. We also don't want the dingoes because they could attack sheep or young cows as well. So we get rid of the dingoes, therefore kangaroo numbers are also going to go up. So there's all these interrelated issues that, yeah, sadly, the response is just kill, kill, kill rather than, finding more sustainable ways to live in harmony with them. And, what we really should be probably doing is reducing the number of cattle.
To me, this is educational, and I'm sure anybody listening can tell, different people have different passions, and animal cruelty really wasn't so much on my radar unless I would hear about it. Like here we hear about dog fighting. And actually, I'm going to be interviewing someone for this podcast who rescues dogs, and they've actually converted a location that was known for dog fighting into a shelter and rehabilitation center, which is really, really cool.
Fantastic.
But it's not something that, like, for me personally has been high on my concerns list. And yet, when I heard your elevator pitch and when I hear you talk about the animals and just looking at factory farming from not just an environmental, because I know it's a huge environmental issue having factory farming with the cows, but also just what's happening. So in Australia, that more and more cows, they're being for the food and the milk and cheese and all of that, actually is really changing the whole animal landscape, I guess. Is that how I would say it? I'm probably not using the right words.
Yeah, I mean, just the way we farm animals and the number of animals farmed just keeps increasing. And, they're always looking at intensifying it more and more. And animal welfare just really isn't a priority.
And it should be. So we have really kind of taken over. It's so funny, Chay, because when you talk about factory farming, my mind goes to California and the Midwest, where I've seen documentaries like Food Inc., that get into factory farming and what that's like. I mean, my mom and dad lived in a little tiny town in Central California. I mean, you drive by factory farms when you're out there. And I wonder, how do you get people to care about cows for example. Like it's easy to care about the little kitten on the end of the live baiting for the greyhounds and can care for the kitten and the bunny and the squirrel or whatever, and even really care for the greyhounds who are being abused for their speed. But how do you get people to care about the animals? How do you get people to care about animal cruelty? How do you break through the noise? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you break through to get there?
It's difficult. And I mean, yeah, fundamentally, we don't believe that animals are here for us. We want to really challenge that notion that animals are just property and that, you can do to property what you like in pursuit of profit or any other reason. So we need to really challenge that. And one of the ways we really try to paint animals as individuals rather than commodities or property or something as a means to an end. And yeah, it can be difficult at times, but, there's a whole range of tactics. Just focusing on the individuals and their individual stories can be quite powerful. And there's increasing numbers of animal sanctuaries as well. We don't work on hands-on sort of sanctuaries and rescue ourselves, but there's a number of fantastic animal sanctuaries around Australia, as there are in the States as well, that I guess give that opportunity for people to actually meet some of these animals like cows and pigs that they would otherwise maybe not see at all or only see in the farming sense. And to, I guess, see them as individuals that don't want to suffer, that don't want to die.
I think what you're saying is very powerful. We're coming off of a month. So January is International Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And I interviewed a number of people who are working with survivors of human trafficking. They're dealing with kind of the opposite problem, and that is people looking at other people as if they were animals in the mindset of that animals are property and you can do whatever you want with an animal. And I think that that's just, something that we've even struggled with here in the United States, where we had an administration that was referring to humans as aliens. And when you have that dehumanizing language, then it's almost like the switch flips and then suddenly it's okay to put them in cages or to, have them chained up or whatever. And I think that when I hear you talk about the animals, if we can get that through our head, what you're talking about, animal cruelty and seeing the animals as having rights and that they're not here for us, that could even have a ripple effect into things like human trafficking as well, because then they're not treating them like animals because they're treating the animals better. Did you follow all that logic? This is female circular logic going on right here.
Yeah, no, I mean, a big issue with, like you're saying, the use of language to make, us and others that we see, in all sorts of different spaces. And like you just mentioned, like refugees and, sex trafficking and all sorts of issues. And so going back to the animals, in our language, we try to talk about them as individuals. So we'll talk about him or her and, tell their story and make it about the individual. So try to get away from the industry terms as much as we can.
Can you give me an example of one? Like, could you tell me a story about an individual animal? I know I'm really putting you on the spot here, but I think it would be helpful to hear a story of an individual animal and hear how you talk about that.
Yeah, well, one that's actually quite sad, but it's just the first one that came to mind because it is quite a powerful one. And we obtained undercover footage from a pig semen collection facility. So again, it's like this place that most people probably never even thought of that exists. And the sole purpose of this place is to hold male pigs, boars, and collect their semen. So that's their sole purpose as far as the owners are concerned, is to collect semen, which they then sell to other pig farms and things like that. And I mean, all factory farms are horrific, but there was definitely some issues that would have been illegal and completely unacceptable in this one as well. And in the footage, we actually saw one particular pig who we named Bo deteriorate over a period of a couple of days. And then towards the end, we actually saw in the footage the owner knew that Bo had problems and would just splash some water in his mouth and, chuck some food, keep him alive as long as needed. And then, eventually he passed away and was just dragged out the back. So, that story reached hundreds of thousands of people. It's just, it brings tears to my eyes now just thinking about it. But the video went somewhat viral on the internet and reached, I think well over 1 million people in the end. So at least that story was told, and I think got a lot of people thinking, what happens to some of these animals?
Right. And so I didn't even know they did stuff like that. Like, who comes up with these ideas? That's what I want to know. Sort of. I mean, I don't really want to know, but it's just like, who even comes up with this stuff? And yet I know that it's not just pigs. Like you said, it's an industry. But what I can say, Chay, is when you gave the pig a name, Bo, then it changed. It did change. The story changed and it got more personal. And I'm imagining now, not this farm that has a whole bunch of them and this is what they do there. But now I'm focused in on this one animal named Bo and what's going on with him. And then he's basically just being kept alive just for the semen, as long as they could get it. And then once he was done, goodbye. And that's the kind of thing that your organization is trying to eradicate. And the way that you're doing it is through storytelling like this, right? And so you said it was a video. And so was it like secret camera footage? Like you guys did some kind of went in investigative reporting style and you got that video? And was it just that video or did you actually did you frame it up with subtitles and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we just got footage that came to us. It was a collection of, hidden camera footage from a couple of different angles, as well as some handheld camera footage that I guess got a bit closer to Bo and the other individuals there. And then, we edited that together with subtitles and some background music to make it even more emotive, not that it really needed it. And put it together in quite a short, kind of just couple of minute long video that we knew that people would watch.
And what kind of outcome are you looking for when you create something like that?
Primarily to challenge people's thinking about these animals and thinking that it's all okay, that if it was that bad, the government would do something, because the government aren't. This is an industry that's had free rein for far too long. And that was actually one of our biggest frustrations in this case. We know that, factory farming is in most places legal, even though there's cruelty involved. But, we thought this one surely would be different. And the level of cruelty and neglect was just so full on that hopefully there'd be some sort of action taken. But again, the authorities went in and they then had to euthanize one of the other animals that was in a bad way. But there was no charges laid. They were allowed to still operate. And it's very, very frustrating.
And so when you think about that, but you think about the video getting out to more people, and when you edit it together and you have your subtitles, what is your call to action for the viewer? Let's say I'm out, on the internet or somebody's sharing it on Twitter or something, and I see this video and I watch it. What are you telling me? Like, I can see what's happening and I will be watching the subtitles. And I would love, if this is still out there, I'd love to get it and put it up on the show notes page so we can have a link to it in case somebody wants to go not see the cruelty, but see how you're framing the story for accomplishing your mission, right? Of moving the needle forward to eradicate animal cruelty. I'm really interested in knowing, what do you tell the viewer? What are you calling them to? Are you saying, come donate to our organization? Are you saying, don't eat bacon? What's your message? I know we're talking very specifically about one thing, but I think that part of what you're sharing with the listeners isn't just a passion for animal rights, but it's also educational as far as just how you as a nonprofit leader are getting your message out there. And what is your message?
Yeah, so ultimately we want people to connect with these animals as individuals and start thinking of them of individuals that suffer, that don't need to be there, and that the only reason they're there is because these industries exist. So really, Bo was there because people buy meat from pigs. No other reason. And there's an industry built around that. So that's what we want people to think about. I mean, ultimately we want people to go vegan. And that wasn't around when we first launched that, but we've recently launched a campaign, a website called Vegan for Life. And that's designed to be a lot more positive and show people how easy it is to swap meat out, especially these days. There's a huge abundance of food options available from supermarkets and stuff. And also remind people of the reasons. So the environmental issues, the animal issues, as well as improving our own health. So we give people, I guess, the tools and the tips to make that transition. And ultimately, we want people to go vegan, but what that looks like for individuals, if that's cutting down at first, if that's, transitioning in some way, then those steps are all very positive.
Yeah. And so it's just getting people to wake up to what is actually happening. Knowing your food source, I guess, knowing the sourcing of your food and realizing, like you said, to see them as individuals. Because if I were to go now even to like a little farm and see pigs, which I've done this once in my life, actually gone to like a pig farm. And I remember walking into the barn that had all the little piglets and they were so cute. And then we went into one that had the larger pigs and I think I about lost my cookies in there. It was so bad. And I think even if I were to go now, I would be looking at that going, okay, so which one is Bo? Like I just have that image now, right? So you've accomplished that. And I think that as you continue to move animal liberation forward, is that part of your mission statement, like to see animals as individuals?
I don't think that exact words is in there, but basically that we want to remove what we call speciesist attitudes. So
wait, say that again. The what attitude?
Speciesist. So just like racism, viewing people of different skin color differently and therefore having different rights. Like, most people recognize as so wrong now, but we still do the same thing with animals. Just because they're a different species, we can treat them however we like.
Okay. So I was like, I couldn't understand what you're saying. So you're saying speciesism. Speciesism. Okay. I've never heard that word. And now I know it. I'll never forget it. And so what's next for you and your organization, or what are you working on now? Now, I know you can't tell me the top secret stuff, but what are you working on right now?
So the Vegan for Life website that I mentioned, we're doing a lot more promotion of that online, just trying different ways to engage people with that. So that's just ongoing.
And that's really for anybody worldwide, right? Like this isn't just Australia or very local focus to your country.
That's right, yeah.
Is it veganforlife.com or is it veganforlife.au?
veganforlife.org.au.
.org.au. Okay, well, I'll put a link to that on the show notes page.
Yeah, so that's one of our ongoing programs that we want to do more with. There's also ongoing work with intensive farming. If we see new farms that are being proposed to be built, we want to, do what we can to raise awareness around that and ultimately try to stop them. We also want to continue to expose and educate people around animal cruelty in these farming systems and help people connect to the individuals. And here in Australia or here in Queensland, we've actually got a review of our Animal Care and Protection Act. So it's a 1 in 20-year review. That's our animal welfare laws. So we'll be doing quite a lot of work in that, trying to make the best possible case to better protect animals. And then we've also got our ongoing campaign with rodeos and trying to get calf roping banned. And I think you might have mentioned that earlier, that we spoke about that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's still going on. There's a lot of delays, of course, with COVID, and we had an election here and things like that. It's lobbying and institutional change and changing laws can take a very long time.
See, calf roping feels to me like part of the American culture, like the rodeo culture that we have. And I would love for you to share, why are you lobbying against that?
Yeah, so specifically calf roping we view as one of the cruelest events within the rodeos. So they're using what are essentially baby animals, so young calves that are running full speed and then they're lassoed around the neck and then yanked quite a lot of force. And even though they may not always look like they're suffering, biologically they're wired to, not show that kind of pain as well. So there's a number of injuries. There have been deaths with calf roping before and breaking the neck and things like that. And there's been scientific studies that have shown that, calves suffer quite a bit and they feel this, pain and fear through this process. So we think that, the animal welfare science backs up that it should be banned. Our surveying of the community backs up that most people think it should be banned. So for us, we think it's a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah, we just need the government to get around to actually making a decision.
I think that you've done a lot of work to raise awareness about the cruelty of calf roping. And like I said, how you're taking the information in and then making the decisions. Do you guys have a strategic plan?
We do, yeah. And we've got several different elements to that. But a large part is that, ongoing work of trying to, get people to connect and just finding different ways to get people to connect with animals and kind of change that consciousness and the way we look at them.
Yeah. So, Chay, I really want to thank you for the time that you've given this morning. Actually, it's tomorrow morning in Australia and it's tonight here in North Carolina. I just want to thank you, though, for making some time to talk with me about this, because I think that part of what you're doing is raising awareness and, we don't know what we don't know. And I appreciate your time. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you? I'm going to definitely put your Vegan for Life website, and I'll put a link to Animal Liberation Queensland. I'll put a link to that as well. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, we're on most of the big social media platforms, but probably the
Okay.
ones we're most active on would be Facebook and Instagram. So if you just look up Animal Liberation Queensland or Animal Lib QLD, you'll find us, or go to the website, which is alq.org.au.
Okay, I will do that. And again, thank you for joining me today, and I will see you in the village.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. To access the show notes or share feedback on this podcast and link over to our socials, visit our website at yournonprofitlife.com. That's yournonprofitlife.com. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you're going to love The Village. It's our exclusive online community where we take what we're learning in the Nonprofit Leadership Lab and apply it. We take it to the next level with live Q&As, boot camps, online book clubs, and legit support from experts committed to helping you extend your nonprofit life. By the way, since we're just getting started, it would mean the world to us if you'd subscribe to the podcast and leave a great review on iTunes. The reviews will help us get the podcast in front of more people as we try to take the whole sector from messy to thriving. See you next time.